As we've already learned, race labels typically reflect physical differences between groups of people. While racial stereotypes are largely based on skin color, and skin color varies within groups as well. Discrimination based on differences in skin color within groups has a specific name in psychology, and we call it colorism. In this video, we'll define colorism and we'll discuss a study that demonstrates what colorism looks like in the real world. Colorism specifically refers to discrimination against individuals with darker skin tones compared to others with the same racial or ethnic group who have lighter skin tones. Now I'll note that we've already seen an example of colorism in our last video. In the 2007 study by Brian Nosek and colleagues, an implicit association test, or IAT, was given to thousands of participants, and the results showed an implicit preference for light skin over dark skin. And this was a colorism effect rather than a racism effect because the skin color was independent of race. Okay, now let's discuss a study that illustrates what colorism looks like in practice. In this study, participants were asked to review resumes of black applicants with varying skin complexion and answer a few questions. Here are two of the key questions that the participants were asked. First, we have an item which I'll call recommendation, where participants were asked to rate how strongly they would recommend the candidate based on a variety of factors like their educational background, their prior work experience, and their overall resume. Basically their qualifications, right? So it seems like this should be pretty objective, but as we'll see, not so much. There were a variety of items that participants responded to that related to this recommendation and the next item as well. One sample item is, based on this applicant's educational background, how likely would you recommend this applicant for the position in question? So pretty straightforward. Next, we have the hiring of applicant key item, where participants were asked how likely they themselves would hire the applicant if they had reviewed this packet and they were in a position to hire someone. So now I'm going to show you the results of the study in this table here. So you have on the columns the two items that we just discussed, recommendation and the hiring of applicant. And then as rows, you have the complexion of the applicants, whether they were lighter skinned, darker skinned, or somewhere in the middle. So here are the results. What you're seeing are means, average results on a 7-point scale, and then in parentheses we have standard deviations, just for good measure, but I'm not really going to talk about standard deviations here. Now in this study, what we saw is that lighter-skinned black applicants were rated roughly a full point higher on a 7-point scale, which is huge, than darker-skinned applicants. So you can see, for example, a light-skinned, on average, light-skinned applicants, plural, I should say, were rated as a 5.96 in terms of how likely they would be recommended for the job, versus dark-skinned applicants, 5.15. And for hiring of applicant, you're seeing something very similar there. Now, what I haven't yet told you is that the researchers also varied the qualifications of the applicants. Specifically, the applicants either held a BA or an MBA, that is a bachelor's level degree, or a master's level degree. Now, how do these results look if we consider the different qualifications? Well, again, let's take a look. Very dishearteningly, the results showed that lighter-skinned applicants were rated higher than darker-skinned applicants again, but even when the lighter-skinned applicants weren't as educated and they were less qualified, we still see that same effect. I'll highlight one strong example here. In this case, a light-skinned applicant with a bachelor's degree was still rated significantly higher than a dark-skinned applicant with an MBA, with a master's level degree, 5.35 versus 4.5 respectively. So not only do people discriminate based on race, which is discrimination between groups, what we call racism, but people also discriminate based on skin color independent of race altogether. This is discrimination within groups, which we call colorism.